SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this
Friday, y'all.
Heck dang, yeah, and it's a hot one out there, too.
But we made it.
Yep, we made it. And, of course, we should expect the heat because it's the end of June. Here in the Magnolia State, that's what happens.
Summertime in the South is a bit steamy.
Yeah, man, no doubt. So, we're all strapped in. We got a bunch to talk about today. It's job security, isn't it? I know for sure, because every day we leave here, and my gosh, all kinds of stuff happens. Big news this morning is the Supreme Court. You talked about this yesterday. We expected during this term, that's what they call it, when the Supreme Court, I guess, technically is in session. That's kind of the equivalent of their being in session. You know, a lot of those folks, they're speakers, they're teachers, they're writers. They do a lot of stuff on the side. You would expect that out of someone on the bench in the highest court in the land. But they also render decisions and opinions, and they've done it today. The big one is the birthright citizenship case heard by the court, and the president is scheduled to speak very soon about this monumental decision. It's kind of complicated, Rhino. You know, it just doesn't come out and say, hey, okay, no more birthright citizenship. Rather, the decision is actually more sweeping than that, happens to apply to this case. But what it says is that, help me out, make sure I get this right, that federal courts and the district levels in the country, of course we have several federal judicial districts, they can't issue injunctions that apply across the whole country. They're not universal, is what they're called, universal injunctions. And that's what's been problematic is that, you know this, you go venue shopping. Oh, I got a particular case. It shouldn't be that way. What happened to blind justice, ruling on the law? No, we've politicized our courts. And so
I'd say that's the majority of the problem. The other part of the problem, we could argue about what percentage it makes up of the problem, is the lawyers.
Oh, there's no doubt. Absolutely no doubt.
They don't really care which party. They just want to get paid.
Yeah, that's true. And so the expression is they churn the files is what they do. But look, this venue shopping, that occurs within the state. It's not just at the federal level. You've got some court venues which may be more friendly on certain cases than other venues. So I can tell you, just as an employer and as a business, thank God, knocking on wood, 3 lawsuits in my 33 years of operating a business, which is honestly kind of astonishing when you think about how litigious our society is. But in all 3 of those cases, there was venue shopping going on by the plaintiffs. We were a defendant. Never sued anybody in my 33-year career. But the plaintiffs, let me go find a venue that's not friendly to businesses, right? In fact, and I'm getting off a bit of the topic on a rant, but I just got to get this out there, man. I literally felt like in one case I had, and I'm blessed in that one employee in 33 years sued me. You think about all the people that we'd employed over such a long period of time, you'd be hard-pressed to find another business that could stake such a claim because they get sued by employees all the time for stupid stuff that doesn't even make sense. But it's always a function of trying to get in the pocket. And what I always had concerns about, in this one case I had involving an employee that went on for about 3 years, got settled out of court for honestly not a whole lot of money at the end of the day, is that you look at the potential jury and you observe proceedings where there's a business and an individual. The business is the defendant, the individual is the plaintiff. I often felt like, well, the jury, this is kind of their take on it. Let's see, you got more money than they do, just give them some. That's kind of how they make their rulings, as opposed to the facts and the law and the application thereof. And again, it depends on the venue, the setting, as to what sort of jury you may draw. And in my understanding from my lawyers is in Mississippi, if there's $1 of economic damages involved, you're entitled to a jury trial. Well, in this particular ruling, and the Attorney General, by the way, Pam Bonding, already out on X, Twitter. Rhino made the rule here. We still call it Twitter. She's already out there taking victory laps. She said this is a victory for the Trump administration, for the country, and that these ideological judges is what it boils down to. Lawmakers in robes, isn't that the expression that often gets attached when you see the judicial system being leveraged, distorted, manipulated, contoured, shaped? All those pretty much mean the same thing, but I'm trying to emphasize it, to achieve a certain political standing outcome. And that's what was going on here. And so this idea that, and I don't know that the court has ever ruled on this, hey, federal courts, you can't hand down injunctions anymore that apply nationwide. You can't do it. Only applies in your district. Now, the downside of that is it would intensify the venue shopping, forum shopping, some of them call it, the forum that you're in, from a judicial and court perspective. That's a risk, no doubt about that. But I think the court got it right because just some rogue federal judge, think about it, should they be able to make a ruling that applies across the country? That's what we have the Supreme Court for. And so the Supreme Court, I think, got it right here and said, you can't do that anymore. Of course, you probably already heard the reports and seen it, Rhino, and I'm trying to describe this from the numerous news reports I've read and heard this morning on it. You had the liberal wing of the court is fear-mongering to all hell and back. Oh, my gosh, it's the end of democracy, right? It's that crap again. The rule of law is gone. It's been dissolved. I mean, they're going crazy on this, are they not? They're overblowing, overshooting, exaggerating the fear-mongering.
Without realizing that everybody's sick and tired of this chicken little game they play.
Exactly. They might as well be an activist somewhere out on the street around the White House or the Capitol with the big blue glasses and the green hair. I hate to profile them and stereotype them like that, but it's pretty dang close to the truth, isn't it?
I mean, there was even a bit of back and forth within the opinions. Like Justice Amy Coney Barrett had this to say about Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's dissenting opinion. Quote, We will not dwell on Justice Jackson's argument, which is at odds with more than 2 centuries' worth of precedent, not to mention the Constitution itself. We observe only this. Justice Jackson decries an imperial executive while embracing an imperial judiciary.
Every now and then you'll see the justices take barbs at each other. It's not often. They're pretty respectful. I think Coney Barrett just said, that's enough. This is ridiculous. You're over the top. You're fear-mongering. You're mischaracterizing. You're misrepresenting. This is a victory, folks. And to the extent that the president, and this is what you got to like about the president here, Rhino, is that he wastes no time. He sees major happenings in our country. This is big, this ruling today. I'm going to talk to the American people about it.
Well, they don't have to give him a 4-hour nap and then some uppers and some ice cream and then walk him through what he's going to have to say and where he's going to have to walk and show him the flashcards with the pictures of where the X is on the stage.
It's so refreshing. So just impromptu, random, almost impulsive a bit, but just reacting. It's big news. The president should come forward and address the people. That's what Americans deserve. We got that. We didn't have it in the prior 4 years. We've got Gaston Box. He's a pharmacist at Savor Express Pharmacy at 1035. Shuwaski Young, 1205. This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Check it out. Let's do this.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's get on with it.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Well studio. So we're awaiting the president to come out and address the nation concerning the Supreme Court rulings that are coming down right now. And so there's another one that was also released. It's, I guess it's kind of less significant than the universal injunction ruling, which will affect birthright citizenship. And so what that does mean, though, is we will end up, just to be clear, with a bit of a patchwork application of the law, that in the district where the judge issued the injunction blocking the president's executive order on birthright citizenship, in other districts, it applies because we don't have this power. The Supreme Court says these districts don't have the power to issue universal, sweeping, nationwide injunctions. It just seems like common sense to me, honestly, that I get the reason we have districts as you navigate a case from lower level courts on through the system, but if they're going to be an injunction's powerful because it stops everything. Well, let's just break
it down to its simplest parts. A district judge is to a Supreme Court justice as, say, a sheriff is to a governor. Judicial branch, executive branch.
Yeah.
Figuring out constitutionality of the laws and what's according to the law and enforcing the laws. You can go down to the legislative branch as well, with all three branches here. Alderman is to a congressman. Like, there are different levels. A sheriff can't decide to declare martial law for an entire state. An alderman can't vote on acts of Congress. So why is a district judge deciding what would be nationwide, which should be under the purview of the Supreme Court?
Completely agree. That just seems common sense. That's why it's called the Supreme Court. size court in the land. Doesn't represent a state or a district. Represents the whole country. Rules for the entire country. Districts rule for a district. And to allow a judge or judges, if it's a panel in the district, to issue these injunctions that would apply nationwide just seems like overstep of power to me, just on the surface. And your analogy's perfect. I agree. Isn't that consistent with our system of federalism? It makes sense to me. So I think it's good news. And
it makes sense to anybody who hasn't been brainwashed into believing that the government can and will take care of you indefinitely.
That's so true. You mean like the
people that live in reality and understand the government doesn't really give a rip about you? They're the ones that are going, yeah, this kind of makes sense.
You must be talking about the New York City mayoral candidate who prevailed in Tuesday's Democratic primary as the nominee for the party, the Democrat Party, in the Big Apple. So, speaking of which, he was on out front with Erin Burnett over there at CNN. This is so weird. Erin has exposed herself as a left-wing loon. Rhino, when I used to watch her on CNBC, she wasn't like that. Now, I get it. That's a business subject channel, network, and it dabbled into politics a bit. The business programs do a lot more now because, unfortunately, politics, political happenings, policy is a lot more impactful and has a greater influence on economic matters and business in general than it should, in my view, and used to. But over there at CNN, when she changed jobs a few years ago, she exposed herself as way left-wing. Well, she had the mayoral candidate, Zoran Mondani, on yesterday, and she shocked him by playing him performing in a rap video. And it was cringeworthy, to say the least. Like, he doesn't have a shirt on, and he's wearing a black apron. He looks kind of goofy to me. And it's a 2019 rap video. And you could tell he was visibly sort of trying to laugh it off, but uncomfortable at a minimum with his short-lived musical career. And you could tell he wasn't happy about this, right? I mean, he was trying to hide it, laugh it off, look at me in this video. And she stated to him, sensing that he was uncomfortable, perhaps even unhappy, quote, "Once you do it, it's out there." Yeah, that's right. I don't think this was exposed during the campaign. I'm a little surprised that it wasn't. So he just looks really cringeworthy in this video. There's no doubt. Kind of silly. And the other thing that was learned in another recording from 2017 is that he praised 5 men known as the Holy Land Five. I never heard of this before. From the Holy Land Foundation for Relief and Development. These people, these 5, were convicted in 2008 of donating more than $12 million to Hamas. My love to the Holy Land Five. You better look them up. That this is the words, the lyrics, this candidate, nominee now, Mondani, and another individual sang in a song called Salam. So his musical career goes back even to 2017, where he's praising these 5. They were convicted, get this, in U.S. Justice, by the U.S. Justice Department on 108 counts of supporting terrorism, tax fraud, and money laundering. And this loon is praising these people. Now, I will tell you this. On my social media, something you and I have talked about, I just posted contrasting side-by-side photos of New York City in its heyday. This was a photo that looks like it's probably from the 50s. Times Square, looking at the vehicles and the clothing. I sort of concluded it was the 50s. Golden era for New York. And then today, and it's got this guy surrounded by a bunch of other people dressed like him in his native culture in New York, in the streets of New York. And I just said, this is a contrast. So somebody on the left saw it and got upset. Well, what's the problem with the way he's dressing? Like, dude, you're missing the point here. If it was just limited to the dress, you're right.
Well, if a leftist wasn't obtuse, they wouldn't be anything at all.
Well, that's true. But it's way beyond just dressing in his native attire. I could halfway live with that. No, it's recording videos, songs, where you're praising terrorists, money launderers, tax defrauders, people that want to kill Jews and Americans, honestly. Do they not get that? They're so focused on this identity crap. It's like Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, a couple of days ago.
Well, no, I'm sincerely convinced that some of the more radical of them don't actually believe that criminals are criminals, that they are just victims of an oppressive system.
So true. We're seeing many of them. What did you talk about yesterday? Was it Jasmine Crockett that said, "Oh yeah, they're afraid all the time, or they're fat and they eat all the time. They have bad personal lifestyle habits because they're worried about the N-word"? Isn't that what she said? Something like that?
No, that was the guy that got unelected. Well, he just didn't get reelected. It's the one that pulled the fire alarm during the vote.
Yeah, up in New York. Yeah, you're right.
And claimed he thought he had to pull the fire alarm to open the door. So
yeah, okay.
Yeah, he's convinced that obesity and heart problems within the black community are due to the N-word.
Okay, well, I apologize. I attributed it to the wrong wacko. My fault. Secretary Pete Hegseth, though, he got asked by a reporter when he was giving kind of a follow-up report on the bombings in Iran. He referred to the crew involved as guys, and some nut went crazy. There's a female involved. And oh, my God, they just are consumed with this identity crap. We're stepping aside for a break, coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
From the Seabrook. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Welcome to our shop.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Okay, now you have a good one.
Welcome back, everyone. That's a little Foreigner. Lou Gramm, Mick Jones, the founders of Foreigner. That was their first big hit, bumping us into this segment. We're in the Element Wealth studio. We welcome now Gaston Box, pharmacist in charge and compounder at Savor Express Pharmacy. Gaston, thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me, Gerard. I really appreciate it.
You bet. So Savor Express Pharmacy is an independent pharmacy, right?
That is correct. Yes, sir, in Ridgeland, Mississippi.
Right. So the pharmacy benefit manager issue has been a high-profile one here in the state of Mississippi, really across the country. And, in fact, there was just a ruling in a case in Texas a couple of days ago involving CVS, as I recall. I hadn't dug in too much of the details, but this has been a very controversial issue here in the state. Really nothing of significance got done this past legislative session. There was legislation to address it. What are your thoughts about this?
Gerard, it's a state issue, first of all. We've got to address it here. You see other states, Alabama, Louisiana, Arkansas, all getting something done last year. I will say we have really good laws on the books. We just need to be able to add on to those laws, clean up, adjust the language to be able to really attack some of these issues that affect pharmacists like me. And I'll give you an example. When I run a claim, and the claim kicks back to me and says after 2 claims that the patient has to go to Walgreens or CVS, they cannot fill with me, but yet the patient's paying for that insurance. That just doesn't seem right to me. And these are patients that I've cared for many years, and then all of a sudden it's dictated where they go because of the PBM. The SIP, Saving Independent Pharmacies, we created that after this legislative session. Not meant to be another pharmacy association. It's meant to bring all the associations together so that we can have one voice to educate, because we really found that businesses in Mississippi, if you look who they're being controlled by or the fear tactics are shared by, is the PBMs, because ultimately they have to keep the cost high to be in a job. So they want to tell the businesses, you do not want to do this. You do not want to, stop spread pricing or stop steering, because ultimately if you look back, why would they not want to do that? Because they claim they would lose their rebate. But the only person who loses the rebate is the big 3. CVS, Caremark, these big ones. If you go back and look at your homegrown local PBMs, they don't have that problem. They'll just say, hey, look, we're going to pass that buck back on to the employers, and then drug costs go down. So that's really where we've got to get in our state. We've got to get laws that say we need pass-through rebates. We need to stop the steering business. We need to you should be able to use your insurance at my pharmacy or at Walgreens or CVS where you want to use your insurance. It's common sense.
So what about the insurers themselves? So the insurers, for the most part, have a relationship with the PBMs, right, that handle the pharmacy aspect of the coverage. That's generally how they, I guess, arose into the industry. It's sitting between is that right? The insurance companies, the pharmaceutical manufacturers, and then the retailers.
Right. Well, back in the 50s, 60s, they were created when pharmacy insurance was created.
Okay.
And their whole goal was we're just going to help process the pharmacy insurance.
Okay. On behalf of the insurance companies.
That's right. They needed the help. They said, well, if we're going to start creating pharmacy insurance, prescription coverage, then we're going to need this person to help us process it.
Got you.
Now that's involved. Why would that person be taking rebates all the way from the top from the wholesaler just to put a drug on formulary? Why would they determine what drugs, we get paid X amount for? We're talking specifically here about brands, but why are they from the top down controlling what amount of rebates we get, our contracts, how much we're paid, non-negotiable contracts? And on that note, the one argument we kept getting last year, and the thing I'm sure you'll hear is, well, I wish as a business that we could assure we weren't going to have any losses. Like, this is, why are the pharmacy world, why are they wanting that? Well, we're, in terms of business, we don't choose our cost. Our costs are dictated to us. We don't choose our contracts. They're non-negotiable. It's take it or leave it. So when you have to have all of these different licensures to be able to do what we do, and then your costs are set, and then how you're paid is set, it's a totally different ballgame, and we have to have intervention by our state government to say, hey, look, y'all got to be paid fairly.
So what would that look like? What specifically would any sort of legislation that you advocate that the state pass, what would that look like exactly?
Gerard, I think it's simple. I think, you look at Medicaid. They've gone to Mississippi Medicaid went to NADAC, National Average Drug Acquisition Cost Plus model, which is, the average NCPA, National Community Pharmacy Association, says that around $12.40, that's the average overcost per prescription. So if we could get NADAC Plus, it would save all the way down like it did Medicaid. Mississippi Medicaid saved, I think, $55 million they showed. Ohio, West Virginia, other states have gone to NADAC Plus model. If we could just get that model, then it would do away with worrying about rebates. It gives you the actual drug cost. They're not able to manipulate the numbers in PBM's benefit. And then the plus part is just to help us pay for the overhead costs, because we've got to pay for the bottle, the cap, the label, the lights, the labor. So one funny fact, and not funny, it's actually sad, but I talked to 2 pharmacists, one of them said in 2024, 72% of their claims were less than this overhead cost figure. 44% were paid less than zero. So you look at this person, she said 65% of my claims I was reimbursed less than the cost of a cup of coffee. 45% less than the cost of a candy bar. And so you're trying to figure out, how am I to pay for a prescription? I'm paying, I'll give you an example, insulin. Just the other day I paid over $500 for these 90 vials of insulin, and after being paid by the patient and the insurance company, I made $2. How do you sustain a business? How do I pay my employees, my lights, my rent? $2.
Well, so how do you make money then? Where do you make money when PBMs aren't involved in the transaction?
Absolutely. So when you look at the Medicaid model, Mississippi Medicaid, I keep going back to that because that's the NADAC Plus model. We still do not make sweeping amounts of money, but we make at least closer to that $11 figure that they're saying is, they've averaged out to be the cost of overhead. We're getting closer to that figure. Sadly, a lot of the times, if you come in and you have a particular insurance, and we have this around our pharmacy posted, if we run it and we don't even make what the drug costs, then we're not even able to run it on your insurance. And we're having to say, hey, look, we're going to have to run this on a fair cash value to be able to pay us and for the medication. And our people have been understanding of that, but the day's going to come and they should rise up and say, we pay for insurance, we want to use our insurance, and they should be able to use it.
So what's the objection from your perspective? What do you hear from the legislature? Why do they? I believe the Speaker of the House has concerns about this, right? So what are the concerns?
And at the end of the day, I think, and I would not want to be in his position, it's a rock and a hard place, because at the end of the day, the right thing to do is to say we're going to stick with what we said we were going to do, and we're going to pass legislation like other states. But he's getting hit back from these businesses who are getting hit from the PBM lobbyists saying, if you do this, if you stop steering, for example, then you're going to lose your rebate that we give you on your employee health plan or your prescription drug plan. So this $30 or $50 or whatever $1,000, $1 million, I'm just throwing numbers out, rebate that we're going to give you, now we're going to have to pass that on to your employers, and that's going to raise their premiums. That's the tactic they sell. But the truth is that they could go with any other PBM and say, no, you're either going to pay us this with it, forget the rebate. This is what we're gonna do, or we're gonna go with a different PBM. It's not they're not stuck with Caremark, so to speak.
So to those who would say, well, that's government sort of price fixing and price controlling and intervening into the market, how would you respond to that?
I would just say that our prices are dictated to us. It's different if we were in a grocery store and I could set the price of a Snicker bar or a cup for whatever price I wanted to make it. That would be one thing. But when my prices are dictated to me, when the contracts are dictated to me, and they're take it or leave it contracts of how I'm paid, which are controlled by the PBMs, this is totally, the free market's already gone.
So if you took I hear you. If you took the position, okay, I'm just going to leave it, and all the independent pharmacists did that, would that not have a significant impact on the pharmaceutical companies, the retailers, the distributors, the PBM's business? Would they not respond? You don't think?
I actually don't, because I think their whole goal is to get mail order and to get rid of us altogether, so they control the market.
I see. So if it works out that there are no independent pharmacists and everybody would be forced to go mail order, or I guess even more importantly or of more concern would be to have to do retail business with a pharmacy that's also part of the same entity. Isn't that a huge problem as well?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Hang around. We keep talking about
Thanks,
this. We got another segment. We got Gaston Box, pharmacist in charge and compounder at Savor Express Pharmacy, an independent pharmacy operation in Ridgeland, Mississippi. We're in the Element Well studio, coming right back.
Covering the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert, Middays with Gerard, SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We're back with you in the Element Well studio. We're visiting with Gaston Box. He's a pharmacist at Savor Express Pharmacy. So nothing happened, and then we were just talking offline. This particular session with respect to any sort of PBM reform, it is a little, I guess, puzzling that our neighboring states have had some legislation that made it across the finish line to, I guess, rein in the PBM practices and so forth, but not here in the state of Mississippi.
It's so puzzling. You could speculate numerous different things that I try to sit at home and figure out what have we done differently, what have we done wrong. Is it because we have multiple, pharmacy associations where some of those states have one big association, so it divides our money, our capital, which is sad because it really shouldn't be about money and who has more money to lobby. It should be about what's right. And you hear I'm thankful for people like you who continue to press this issue, but you hear like Donald Trump, he says, there's an issue. The issue's the middleman. We've got to get rid of the middleman.
He calls them monsters, I think.
Monsters. So at the end of the day, everybody knows that the issue is there. One of the major politicians in our state, I won't name drop, but he says, if all of us, if we could line them up in a line and we could just shoot all the PBMs, we would take them out overnight. And it's like, okay, we'll do it because you have the power to do it. Y'all can, vote on this and get legislation passed that would protect our communities, because it's not just about independent pharmacies. It's about communities. When my patients come into my pharmacy, I know them by name. I know what, is going on in their family. I call them by name. I know their medications that they take. They're not a number to me, Gerard. And so when you come, you get better health care. And so if you take us out, if we end up losing our jobs, then you're going to have lower access to care and poorer quality of care. That's a guarantee.
Well, some of the chains are actually shutting down their retail locations, Walgreens in particular, right?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. So, they say, well, it's not just you, it's the chains. That's definitely planned. So, again, CVS is a part of Caremark. Walgreens pushes, with their mail order. So that's what they want to do. Wouldn't you rather get rid of all of your brick and mortar stores and have to push patients to mail order so that you don't have to have as many pharmacists to pay and you don't have to have as many sites that you're having to pay for the overhead? That's what they're doing. They're purposefully shutting those places down so that you're forced to mail order. That was all planned. We want to be right there in your communities and serving you. We want you to be able to come into our pharmacies and be able to interact with us, and so that we get to know you and you're not a number like you will be at those big chains.
Well, so at a minimum, has there been any effort within the state just to ban PBM services when the PBM is a subsidiary, is tightly connected to the retailer and the wholesaler?
No, I'm thinking you're talking about like Arkansas and Louisiana tried, and I think that Louisiana's made a point they're going to do it in a special session. No, the answer is no, and that would be a great step in Mississippi. You asked earlier in the segment, what could we do? What are our goals? That's definitely one of the top ones. Is if you are a PBM and you're vertically integrated, cut it right there. You should not be able to own the insurance company, the pharmacy, and the PBM all the way up. That's vertical integration.
I mean, it gets into the area of antitrust. I can see where that would be an issue. On the other hand, I'm a free market proponent as well, but when you've sort of got a lock on the entire supply chain, that becomes a little bit more problematic, and I can see where there might be the need for some reforms there. So what's next?
So we're not giving up. That's what I said. We created.
Who's we, by the way? Is it all the independent pharmacists?
It's all pharmacists. It's you. It's our community.
Okay.
That's what the SIP is. The SIP is to bring everybody together. I want to bring the businesses to the table. I want to bring pharmacists and community members, our legislators, all to the table and say, look, we can do this. We can decrease cost of medications right here in our state, like Trump has said that we need to do across the nation. Well, that's important now,
because I think that's what people are hearing is if it's the speaker's opinion and perhaps others that, hey, if we implemented some of these reforms, that could cause costs to rise for patients. Is your position
Those are fear tactics.
Okay.
I think that we look at the proof. We look at Mississippi Medicaid. We look at those other states like Ohio and West Virginia. We're going to look at our sister state here in a couple years, Alabama, who's just done these things that we're wanting. Okay. And we're going to see that costs go down when you make these measures. When you take out that middleman, you're going to see costs go down.
When's the last time you spoke to the speaker about this?
2 months ago, and he gave me his commitment that he's willing to work and ready to work on this.
So the session 6-7 months away from now, is this going to be a high priority again?
Absolutely. We're going to be there every day.
Before we go, what's the Senate's temperature on this? The lieutenant governor and so forth.
The lieutenant governor was on our side 100% last year. He understands the issue, and I think that he's going to be on our side again this year.
The governor? What about him?
The governor has made a commitment that if it gets to his desk, he will sign it.
Okay. So you just need to get one chamber going, sounds like.
Maybe one person.
Okay. Gaston Box, pharmacist in
Gerard.
charge and compounder, Sabre Express Pharmacy, has been our guest talking about PBM reform. Appreciate you coming in.
I
and
appreciate all you're
that.
doing.
Yep, you bet. We're stepping aside for a break. It is time for Fox News and SuperTalk News as the Fab Four bumps us out here. Coming right back. Of MidDays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
Welcome to the show that challenges you to think deeply and look beyond political posturing. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It is MidDays. We are live in the Element Wealth studio on this
Friday, y'all.
Yeah, man, we're here, all strapped in, ready to go. Hour 2 of the program. The Dow, by the way, up 500 points at this point. The president is speaking. He is talking about a range of topics. He, of course, started out by discussing the landmark Supreme Court rulings handed down today. The big one is the prohibition against a district court, federal court, issuing a universal injunction. So that's big news. And then the other that just released, Rhino, that upheld a Texas age verification law for adult websites. So it looks like that's good to go. So a series of wins today for the president. Now he's talking about trade, says we're looking good on trade barriers. He's also talking about the amount of money being taken in from tariffs. So just to clarify that for you folks, last year, in Joe Biden's last year as president, we took in about $170 billion in tariff revenue. Of course, keep in mind, tariffs are paid by American companies. They're the ones who actually remit payment to the Treasury. Now, in some cases, foreign exporters might absorb those costs, and the way they do that is just by lowering or not changing the price of what they sell, what they export that is imported by American companies. They just absorb it. So, and actually they would, now that I think about it, I'd spoke right the first time. They'd have to lower the cost because it's the American companies that, on an offsetting basis, pay the import tariff. So that was about $170 billion last year. We're on a run rate this year, and that's what the president's talking about, to take in about $270 billion. So it's about $100 billion more. That's a lot of money. Unfortunately, in a $7 trillion budget, it's really not. It's not significant. It's not anything you can say, yep, that'll do it. That'll address the deficit, which is on track to be $2.3 trillion. It's just amazing Why is all that important? Well, because the big, beautiful bill's being negotiated in the U.S. Senate after it was transported from the House, and they're running out of time. Is the Senate. They're trying to get out of town today.
Well, they're running out of big in the big, beautiful bill. It's the parliamentarian keeps carving it up.
So, yeah, that's what we were going to get to there. The parliamentarian, and so this would be, I don't remember her first name, Ms. McDonough. I can't remember her first name. I just know the last name. She's been there a long time, by the way. And she has ruled that the numerous Medicaid reforms included in the bill. So here's the way it works, just at a high level, is in order to pass legislation with a simple majority in the Senate, which otherwise requires the filibuster-proof 60 votes, that means you'd have to pull some people from the other party, in this case Republicans, which hold 53 seats in the senior chamber, would have to get, if they got all Republicans to vote for a measure, 7 Democrats. That ain't likely on something like this. They don't agree with the big, beautiful bill whatsoever or its provisions. So,
no matter how many times Fetterman gives kudos to Trump, he's not going to vote for anything the Republicans want.
Great point. That's absolutely right. He might, I guess you could say, Rhino gets a little attention. Well, he gets more than a little attention. And I think you'd have to put him in that category as well, would you not?
Oh, yeah.
That he's seeking attention. He knows he gets it because he often makes statements that are a bit sensational and that they just don't toe the Democrat Party line. The case in point with Iran. He said, yeah, it seems like the right thing to do. Meanwhile, you got other members of the Democrat Party that are just blasting, no pun intended, the president's order to bomb Iran and decimate their nuclear capability. But here's the deal. You got to have those Democrats. Like you said, he may be the most likely, and he won't vote for this legislation, this budget package. So that means you've got to craft the legislation in a way that qualifies to pass through what are called the reconciliation rules, also known as the Byrd rule, named after Senator Byrd. Was he from West Virginia, I believe, that came up with this idea. Hey, we need a way to pass legislation that just deals with the budget, if you will, and with a simple majority. And there's some other constraints and parameters about the amounts. Gets kind of complicated. I got to tell you, Rhino, I always was concerned about the bill in the House when they included these Medicaid reforms in there, which deal with eligibility, for example. That, how are they going to get that in the reconciliation package? And the way they attempted to do that was by saying, hey, look, this is going to save the government money. So they made it a budget issue. And the parliamentarian who analyzes, she and her staff, analyze legislation to determine whether or not it meets the parameters to pass through simple majority. They also refer to that process metaphorically as the Byrd bath, of course, referencing Senator Byrd, who came up with this process. It's called the Byrd bath. And so they filter through the legislation. Well, yesterday, what's funny?
It just shows how out of touch and how old Congress is.
That is so true.
Oh, we made this funny pun about a bird bath.
That's true.
Nobody under 50 knows what a bird bath is or cares to watch birds play in one.
That's true. Well, I'm over 50. I'll admit I have one in my yard.
It's not exactly the first thing a young couple puts in their yard.
No, I agree. So, but my sweet wife is a big fan of birds, and we have bird feeders hanging on the perimeter of my lot, and it's her routine every morning with my dog to walk out and feed the birds. I don't know what that cost me. It just feels like it costs a fortune to all the bird feed. I try not to look at it. And she, I will have to admit, inherited that from her mother.
Oh, yeah, it's an older generation thing. It's something the younger generations haven't picked up on a whole lot, but that's why I was laughing. It's like, yeah, that's just another example that Congress is old.
And then when they drive north from Biloxi, from whence they hail, to visit with us back when they were alive, it's like it took them 5 hours. Like, what are you doing? They're stopping to watch the birds. I mean, they had the big binoculars. I mean, they truly were bird watchers. All I could think about was Miss Jane Hathaway from the Beverly Hills.
Well, I mean, I can't really say anything because those same people, if they had been born in a younger generation, they'd be really obsessed with Pokemon.
That's true.
Because it scratches a similar itch.
That's true.
Got to see them all. Got to catch them all. It's the same thing.
Okay, so we're digressing. That was kind of fun. But it's going through the bird bath. And so she came back yesterday and said, did Miss McDonough, the Senate parliamentarian, say, yeah, this ain't going to work there, Senator Thune. You can't do these Medicaid reforms. So right now, the status is they're scrambling, literally, the Senate, right now, today, at this moment, to try to make some adjustments that would pass muster in the parliamentarians' eyes. Because here's the problem. You put that in there, these Medicaid reforms, which are expected to save a fair amount of money, actually $880 billion, which, remember, always talking in terms of 10 years. All this sort of legislation is always scored over a 10-year period, always calculated, scored. So anytime you hear these politicians spout all these figures and numbers off, just keep in mind they're talking about 10 years. $880 billion is a lot, but it's 10 years. It's $80 billion a year. That's a lot. But in a $2.3 trillion deficit budget, you got a ways to go, guys, to get some significant impact. So she came back. So now the problem is, if those reforms aren't allowed to reduce spending, then they got to figure out other changes, and that might mean that some of the tax reforms get the hatchet. That's the problem with this thing.
Or Vance could just overrule her.
He can. I mean, there's a legal, procedural process involved in that. Man, the Democrats would freak out on that deal. My gosh. We're going to take a break right now. Don't forget, at 12:05 today, it's Shuwaski Young, former candidate for Congress, making a big announcement about his political future on Middays.
Money should never stay.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
We're rolling. Hit it. Go. Play it.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Back with you in the Element Wealth studio. The president says the tariff critics should go back to school. I just hope that we don't see at some point here in the future, the near future, these tariffs cause the price of stuff to go up. I mean, so far it hasn't. It's hard to tell, though, how much of that product that we're still consuming today, those goods, were purchased, imported prior to the tariffs. Now, no doubt, a lot have come in since the tariffs went into effect, which is why the tariff revenue's up substantially. Almost double, honestly.
I think
so
the more realistic, middle-of-the-road reality is that they're pretty much through their stockpiles of what they bought pre-tariffs at this point. And they are using the fact that the baseline price has been so inflated by inflation that what you pay now is what you're going to pay going forward, barring more inflation. And any savings they would have passed on are now going towards the tariffs.
Well, it could be, but somebody's picking up the tab.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the president says it's the other countries that are just absorbing those and passing.
To a certain extent, yeah.
Yeah, which means they're reducing the price, again, to the importer, the American importer, because they're having to then turn around and pay the tariff to the government. The importer is. I think in some cases the importer is absorbing some of it. I mean, so we don't have visibility into the deals being cut behind the scenes. Those are private contracts. It's the way it should work, honestly.
But there is a fair amount of scuttlebutt that India and China are competing a lot in manufacturing with what they are willing to absorb as far as tariff costs.
There's also lots of reports about just kind of playing shell games, right?
Yeah.
Moving stuff around into countries that aren't subject to the higher tariffs. That's going on as well.
Been going on.
Yes, it has been going on, but I think that's probably picked up the pace a bit as well since April 2nd. So all that's going on, and then you just got the issue of some retailers are in fact raising prices. We did get the personal consumption expense report today, the Fed's favorite measurement of inflation, and it came in pretty much in line with expectations. The excluding food and energy, that's what's called the core personal consumption expenditure, the PCE. It posted respective readings of 0.2% and 2.7% compared with the estimates of 0.1 and 2.6. So in both the month over month and the annual, what we got was a 0.1% reading greater than expectations in both the month over month and the annual for the core. One thing that is worrying investors in the markets and the economists in general is that consumer spending and income showed signs of weakening. Spending fell 0.1%. Personal income, this is a concern, declined 0.4%. So we just got a positive report a couple of weeks ago on real wages. And now we're getting a negative report on personal disposable income. So the question is, and this is what, all the investment community is glued to, is what does this mean to the Fed? It's not really at the 2% level. They've said that they want to see before they get serious about making significant rate cuts, but yet it's pretty steady.
Was it at the 2% level right before the election when they made cuts?
No, absolutely not. No, and that was, I've been critical of Jay Powell, honestly. I'd as the president calls him, too late Jay, too late Powell, whatever he said. I think he just says too late. He don't even use his name anymore, just refers to him as too late. I'm upset because I think they all called it wrong. You and I talked about it on the show, right? When it was going on, it was like, what? When he and Treasury Secretary Yellen and all the economists in the West Wing there were saying, calm down, it's transitory. And then like 6 months later, it's freaking 9%. And everybody's going, what the hell? Remember that? And they continue to tell us, it's transitory. So we went from 2 to 3 to 4 to 9, and then after 9, and they continue to tell us it's transitory, ignoring economic reality, is that we pumped trillions into the money supply.
No, Democrats rejecting reality? No.
Oh, man. Well, they live in la-la land, honestly. They don't live in the real world like the rest of us have to contend with. So now the president's saying July 4th is not the end all. He still wants the big, beautiful bill out to his desk on July 4th. Man, I just don't know if there's a way to get that done. The Senate, Rhino, I think they're trying to get out of town like today, right? Originally. But I think now they've been instructed to stick around next week to get this thing done, because then they got to get back with the House. They change a comma or a period, and it's got to go back to the House. So, and you got the parliamentarian, Ms. McDonough, who throws a wrench in the works here at the 11th hour. Oh, you guys can't do this Medicaid reform. So that's turned the thing upside down. I'm concerned.
Even though all the amendments for Obamacare were fine in reconciliation.
Right. That's right. That's how Obamacare passed. I don't know that a lot of people realize this. Now, it did cause them to pass legislation that was considerably less draconian and onerous than originally that they want. And that was because of the untimely death of the lion of the Senate, Senator Ted Kennedy. ironically enough, kind of the father, the biggest proponent of major health care, a socialized medicine, honestly. But unlike what Thomas describes as socialized medicine, he wanted complete, like UK, Canada, Spain, France-like socialized medicine, where the vast majority of medical professionals were employees of the government, right? That's what he wanted. And
I mean, in those countries, you still have private practice, but you're paying through the nose for it, and only the wealthy can afford it.
It's cottage industry.
Oh, yeah.
It's not the typical.
Meanwhile, your average person, if they break their arm, they show up to the emergency room, and they go, oh, yeah, you got a broken arm. Here's a cast. We'll get an x-ray in about 7 weeks.
Exactly right. Yeah, and you can imagine other more serious health conditions, the outcomes produced with the delays.
Yeah, try not to be joking about the prognosis of, you have a year to live, we can get you that CAT scan in about 18 months.
Unbelievable. So this is what's going on the Hill right now. It's a big deal that can't get this bill out. I'm a little surprised, honestly, that the investment community is shaking this off because the Dow's up 550 and the NASDAQ's up as well. I think the funny money's up today as well. I think some of that may be a bit of exuberance over the Supreme Court rulings. Not that has a direct impact on the economy, but does it not at least show our Supreme Court is adhering to, upholding the laws? Because you can't have a thriving economy without the law being enforced, without people acting right. You can't have rogue banana republic-like judiciary. You cannot have a thriving economy. You want to know why these countries in Africa, for example, and I don't want to pick on that continent, but it is one that's got a lot of people that are poor. I mean, we think we're poor here. Oh, you only have 2 flat screens? Oh, you poor thing. Over there, it's like, I'm looking for some water other than that dirt crap in a ditch. I'm not exaggerating here either, at all. So, but why are they like that? Because they don't have a rule of law. It's a handful of people that steal everything. And when you have a rogue system of government, which is what I think we had when we had these ideological judges saying, yeah, I'm issuing an injunction, I don't like Trump, nationwide, well, I would consider that a bucking of the rule of law. You cannot have a thriving economy. It's why we're so rich in this country. Because we do have a rule of law. Now, there are a lot of people like the goofy nominee for mayor of New York. He would be fine with abolishing law. Just let everybody out.
Which is why he very well may be in actual hot water when it comes to his citizenship.
That is true. And I hope that gets further investigated. Because it's shaky at best, is it not?
I mean, he has publicly endorsed communist ideals. He has publicly endorsed terrorist and terroristic activity, both of which are forbidden within a time frame of your naturalization process, before or after.
Yeah, it ain't right. I'm telling you. That guy's... So now you've got even Wall Street coming out of the woodwork. Where can we give our money to make sure this guy gets defeated? Speaking of which, I watched a video that came up in my reels that is just looks like an average person that says she's read the Big Beautiful Bill and is blasting it, and like the first 3 things she said were wrong. We're coming right back. Stay with us.
From the Seabrook.
Okay, is everybody ready?
I'm ready. Ready here.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
The local rock group down the street is trying hard to learn their song. Serenade the weekend squire who just came out to mow his lawn. Another Pleasant Valley Sunday.
That's a good tune there. It's my favorite Monkey song, by the way.
Rows of houses that are all the same.
That could probably apply today, couldn't it? 60 years later, roughly. That's Mickey Dolenz, by the way, on the drums and lead vocals. Well, he was on the drums at least in the in the television show. I don't know how much he actually played on the records. That was kind of an era where someone else did all the actual heavy lifting, as they say. So you were just telling me about another Supreme Court ruling. Was that right?
Yeah, there were a couple other Supreme Court rulings you'll likely not hear a whole lot about because of the injunctions angering the left so much. But there was the Supreme Court case involving the opting out of students if a study or if a lesson was going to include books or subject matter of an LGBTQ plus or sexual nature. The Supreme Court sided with the Maryland parents, saying that they can opt out. And the Supreme Court this is one you'll definitely not hear a whole lot about because the justices kind of blended together in their ideologies. I believe it was Kagan that wrote the majority opinion, but was joined by several conservative justices, and I believe it was Thomas that wrote the dissent. But in a 6-3 vote, they reversed an appeal court ruling that struck down as unconstitutional the Universal Service Fund, which is a charge you probably see on every phone bill you've ever got.
Yep, USF.
Or at least for the last couple decades.
96, I think.
Yeah.
That's when it came into effect.
It provides for subsidized phone and internet services in schools, libraries, rural areas, and the FCC is the agency that collects the money. Supreme Court said that that's not unconstitutional. They can continue collecting that money. And then the last one I saw was the Supreme Court rejected the challenge from a group of Christian employers that were challenging the Affordable Care Act's requirement that they fully cover certain medications and services. In the Supreme Court, it was 6-3 ruling. They basically said Obamacare is the law of the land, and it's not the Supreme Court's place to be dictating which parts of the law are enforced.
Yeah. So that is better described maybe or alternatively described as the so-called wellness care. And that one of the big insurance reforms in Obamacare was that you would be, as a subscriber to insurance, entitled to so-called free wellness care or very low cost, maybe a little copay or something. Twice a year, something like that, I think, was part of the reform. And, of course, prior to that, you could buy insurance that didn't have such a feature in it, set the coverage, right? The issue that you bring up all the time is, but you're paying for it. I mean, so this wasn't to force the insurance companies to give you something. They didn't do that. They didn't say, hey, insurance companies, you're going to have to cover more services but not get reimbursed for it. No, all they did was, and this is government, this is exactly what government was doing here. These people out there, they don't know what they're doing. We can't let them buy insurance that doesn't include free wellness coverage, even though some people may want that. No, we can't do that. We got to protect them from that. Therefore, we're going to dictate that all policies sold in this country include so-called free wellness coverage, except it ain't. That's when the premiums went up. The insurance companies say, wait, we got to cover that now? Oh, well, we got to go up on the premium. That's exactly what happened. Exactly what happened. So if you want to buy coverage that says, just help me out here if I have a catastrophe, something that's beyond my means to afford,
then you got to repeal Obamacare.
Right, exactly. And that's what the court's saying here. And I think the court got that right. I don't like the policy. Don't get me wrong. I don't like the law. But the court got it right here. And we need to protect the integrity of the lawmaking process in this country. We don't. And in fact, you could argue, Rhino, had they ruled differently on this one, well, that would be an example of the court making law. Because they'd be overriding law, not ruling on the constitutionality of it. And this is the same thing with Roe v. Wade, essentially. They said, no, there's no laws on this. This was just the Supreme Court in 1973 that said, hey, Roe v. Wade, boom, here's a ruling on that. No, there's no law. You just pull that out of thin air, made it out of whole cloth. And it took 50 years to come back and say, you guys got that wrong. This goes to the states. This is not within the scope of the Supreme Court. They got it right, in my view. And I think they got it right here. So I would call that good news for the rule of law. Still bad news for consumers and patients is that you're paying for this whether you want it or not. And there's, in some states, you know that, there's a lot of other crazy stuff you pay for. What do you bring up all the time? Birth control pills and...
Yeah, me having to pay for prenatal vitamins that I will never use is asinine.
Right. But that's what the law did. And it permitted states to expand on that. The other thing you remember that may not be popular among the women, even in our conservative state, is this thing called community rating, which basically says that insurers can charge certain elements of the community higher insurance premiums than others. And the most obvious example is an older person who's more likely to get sick and need medical services than a young person. And prior to Obamacare, there were no limits on that from a practical perspective. So you could have an old person paying 10 to 1 with a young person. And they said, 3 to 1's the max. So what happened is the premiums for the old people sort of stabilized somewhat, but the young people went up, skyrocketed. You're paying for the older people. Well, another aspect of that was females, generally speaking, consume more health care. Because despite what the left says in this country, only they can get pregnant and need things like prenatal vitamins and other medical services that are unique and exclusive to females.
Yeah, the plumbing's a little bit more complicated.
No doubt. And so insurers charge a little more money for them. But they came back and said, no.
Kind of like a mechanic charges more money to work on a Beamer than he does on a lawnmower.
Great point. Same deal. So all that, I think, it's been a long time because it passed in 2010, 15 years ago. But just letting you guys know, those were the reforms. So now what you did get in there, something that's popular even with people on the right, and the president supports it, is you can't deny people coverage for so-called pre-existing conditions. You can't kick people off their plans if they start using too much because they're too sick. A lot of people say, yeah, that's popular. And I think those are good policies as well, except you're still paying for it. I don't think that is understood. You put all these policies in place, you're paying for it. It's not like they're just benevolent and altruistic, the insurance companies, and saying, or the medical providers for that matter, saying, oh yeah, because this law passed, we're just going to give that to you. No, you're freaking paying for it. And the government said, you're going to pay for it. But
that's
we're
why
going to
there was a
protect
fine
you.
To begin with, because they knew young people wouldn't pay the higher premiums.
That's exactly right. And so they said, okay, you're going to have. And the other thing is they needed them paying in to cover the lack of community rating pricing. I mean, it's complicated. I know I'm digressing, and it's 15 years old, and nobody even talks about so-called repeal of it. But if you want to know why your insurance is expensive, it all got cranked up then. It's because you have limited options at the end of the day. You end up having to buy a whole lot more insurance, in many cases, than you want or need, is the bottom line here. So I would say they got that particular ruling right. Before we went to break, I was talking about, and I went back and looked at it, it is some sort of activist. This looks like a reasonable person, and it's a middle-aged lady who says, I just got through reading the big, beautiful bill, and they're all scrambling around today, and they're trying to get this thing passed. And I just got to tell you guys what's in it. And everything she says is wrong. Like, one of the things got my attention, that I'm getting ready this morning at 6:30, headed out to a breakfast with friends, and I caught this when it came across my reel, and here's what she said, that capital gains would be that capital gains will be exempt from federal income tax to the tune of 50% if they're held for 3 years, and 100% of the capital gain would be held for 5 years. I said, well, hell, how could that not have been all over the news? The market would be at 70,000 today. And I started looking into it. Oh, you're talking about the rule we have in place now, qualified small businesses. They made some minor changes to that. She just completely misrepresented that. Completely. Because she described it exactly as I did, which is categorically false. Coming right back. Don't forget Shuwaski Young at 12:05.
Polyumpa, Mississippi.
Middays with Gerard.
Good for America. Good for fans of justice and truth. Good for us.
SuperTalk, Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio. It's Shuwaski Young at 12:05. That's in the next segment. After the break at the top of the hour, he's informed us of his intention to announce his political future here on Middays. He sought us out. It's pretty neat that he wants to come on the program to make this announcement. I believe Rhino will be the first media outlet to cover this announcement, so that will be big news across the state of Mississippi. Shuwaski, of course, formerly a Democrat, and converted. He came on the show and talked about that. You remember that within a day or two after his announcement of converting to the Republican Party. So it appears he's poised to run for office as a Republican. I've been remiss this morning. I apologize, guys. We got so much going on. I haven't gotten to the text, and I'm going to get to a few of those right now. David on the rest says that's why all the Fan suits were filed in Holmes County, and that was just with respect to our kicking the show off with this landmark decision at the Supreme Court that you can't at a district level issue an injunction in federal court in a district that applies nationwide. And started talking about this idea of venue shopping. I've also heard it referred to as forum shopping, same deal. Those are synonymous for the most part, where, lawyers look for the venues, the judges, and even juries when there's a jury involved, or prospective jurors that would be more friendly. I know when I got sued by an employee, the only time I mentioned that before, it was sued in Hinds County. We spent over a year getting venue changed because Hinds County, guys, is not friendly to employers. Really doesn't matter what the facts are of the case. What matters is, like I said, wait, you're an employer? Oh, you're bad. We're for that person. You got more money than them. You got to give them some. Literally. Let's see what else we got here. Charles and Matheson, also the parents' right decision. Yeah, Rhino was just talking to me about that. Tell him about that, Rhino. This is in Maryland, right?
Yeah, the Supreme Court ruled that parents can opt their children out of classes or assignments or lessons that involve LGBTQ plus activities or any discussions on sexuality.
Yeah. Wayne in Batesville says most people aren't aware that CVS owns Aetna. Aetna pushes business to CVS when they can. Yeah, and then you got the PBMs involved in that. I got to tell you, Wayne and folks, my biggest concern with the whole PBM industry, if you will, and that ecosystem is when you do have these middlemen, so to speak, PBMs that are vertically integrated with the the health insurer, the headline health insurer, such as an Aetna, but also often part of the same company that's in the pharmaceutical retail business. That's a problem. I find that to be borderline antitrust. That concerns me more than anything. Sounds about like farming on the C Spire text line. Yeah, I get it. This is the actual markup on the drugs is 800%. 90 units of insulin he mentioned cost him, this is according to my drug rep wife who works for Pfizer, cost on the open market. So in all the research I've done on this, I will tell you this, the profit made by the pharmaceutical companies is not unreasonable. The net total aggregate profit. I do get it that there's some drugs such as insulin where that just seems crazy. Then they have these patent protections that allow them, right, to keep pushing these things out. You've talked about that before, making these minute, minuscule, almost irrelevant changes.
Well, in insulin, it's more the method at which it is given to the patient and the extended release properties of the insulin that they have trademarked and made name brand. And
yeah,
I mean, you can get relatively cheap insulin that you will have to inject yourself with a syringe, and you will not have the convenience of having it in a pen or have it be extended release where you don't have to give it to yourself as many times. But those are things you're going to have to pay for.
Okay. So there's downside to less convenience. I mean, that makes sense.
Like most things in life, you pay for convenience.
Makes total sense. The state of California, I believe, is currently in the process, if I'm not mistaken, of standing up insulin factories. That's kind of like the retail grocery store idea in New York by the socialist up there. Similar sort of situation. And then you got Mark Cuban who's talking about, I think he's in the process of doing it, like building a pharmaceutical company right now to sell it like some low-cost plus model. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Well, we're stepping aside for a break. It's time for Fox News, SuperTalk News. When we come back, it's political candidate Shuwaski Young.
Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It is hour 3, the afternoon portion of Middays, now live from the Element Wealth Studio on this
Friday, y'all.
It's our pleasure to welcome now Shuwaski Young. Mr. Young was involved in politics even prior to today as a candidate for Congress, right?
That's right.
Not too long ago?
2022.
2022,
Absolutely.
Not too long ago. You were a Democrat at that time?
I was a Democrat at that time and have learned a lot since then, I'll tell you that.
You changed parties, changed your stripes?
I did.
You came on the show, you talked about that?
Much
right
talked
after
about.
It. Yes.
Much talked about.
So today you're here because it's our understanding you've got some news for us.
That's right. And I want to do it nowhere else other than on SuperTalk. And thank you so much for having me on the show, Gerard. I'm here today to tell the good folks of Mississippi that I'm humbly asking for their support, as today I'm announcing my candidacy for the 2027 election for the Republican nomination for Secretary of State.
Okay, Secretary of State.
Secretary, when it all started.
As a Republican.
As a Republican.
All
That's
right. So I guess my first question would be, Shuwaski, why Secretary of State?
Well, great question. When I was a senior at Jackson State University, I interned at the Mississippi Secretary of State's office.
Okay.
Over about a year and a half, I was in the Public Lands Division. And later on, that's where I had my first professional job after graduation. I was hired as Director of Marketing and Training. And in that particular position, you go around, you train all the 410 election commissioners here in the state. You travel for all 82 counties holding those certifications that they need in order to run elections. And that's what I did for the Secretary of State during the time that I was there. That's where I learned about the importance of each division at the Secretary of State, from business services to public lands to elections, and how they play such a major role in our state's economy, and how they play such a major role, of course, in us having secure and protected elections here in the state.
Okay. So this is your passion, it sounds like. So let me ask you, it doesn't matter to me, but are you a lawyer?
No,
okay.
no. My fiance is. Well,
but your fiance is not going to be the Secretary of State.
No, she's not. She's not. But because she did.
I stayed at a Holiday Inn too.
Right.
So.
but no, I'm not a lawyer. I have.
And you don't have to be.
Right. You don't. I've worked with a lot of lawyers, but I understand how government works. I understand how we need to be able to use people to apply the law properly.
Okay.
And be able to work with legislators to make sure we're putting forth laws that are built on the books that people can respect, and also make our state better.
So the Secretary of State's office, and I don't know, Shuwaski, honestly, if the average person on the street knows exactly what Secretary of State does and what their primary functions are, but there's a business aspect and a business services component.
Absolutely.
That's pretty significant. I think most people kind of know about overseeing elections. In general, they're aware Secretary of State has that responsibility, but there's a business services aspect that's pretty significant.
Right, and also the regular
public lands.
Public lands as well. Our 16 section land, that goes out here that schools are on and things of that nature. But anytime that you're starting a business, or anytime that you're staying within the regulations of the state to be able to run that business properly, whether that's through permitting or leasing, or how you're actually forming partnerships on behalf of the state, and even with other companies, your Secretary of State's office is going to play a major role in that particular process.
Right.
If you're talking about public lands, whether it's blighted property or whether it's forfeited property, county property that started off in someone's personal hands or individual's hands, didn't necessarily get their taxes paid on, it goes to the county for a bit of a time, and then that goes to the state, actually, for us to be marketed off at the highest price or lowest bidded price.
And then you've got the responsibility of administering the Uniform Commercial Code, UCC.
Absolutely.
Filings is a big deal.
Absolutely.
And the good news there is that certainly before you would take office, should you be fortunate enough to be elected, a lot of that heavy lifting has been already done as far as the systems and the automation, and it's been going on for a couple of decades.
Absolutely.
Honestly. So,
absolutely.
But you got to maintain that, and there's always new stuff that's got to be implemented as well. So the shop seems to be in pretty good shape, and it's important that it's easy for businesses to do business and transact
100%.
with Secretary of State.
100%. And I think that the reputation that, the current Secretary of State, Michael Watson, has earned over the course of the last couple of years has been one of which he's always done a pretty good job, and no one wants to challenge, an incumbent that is doing a good job, whether you're Democrat or Republican. And I think that what we've been able to see in that particular office is that he has left it, or has it in a place, where we can actually build upon that, help modernize the actual systems, help move some of our campaign finance reform laws in place, working better with the Attorney General's office, but also be able to expand voter access in a way that's responsible, that is what people in Mississippi actually want. Now, my vision is hopefully that, just like Secretary Watson, that we may be able to bring early voting one day to Mississippi. And I certainly don't have a perspective of doing that in a 30 or 45-day period before the election. I don't know what that particular number may be, whether it's 5 days or 10 days before the election. But that's why I'm announcing today, because that gives me an opportunity to get out there and talk with folks in the state for quite some time to understand exactly what they want. In closing on that point, I feel like my job, is to give that vision that this is something I think would be good for Mississippi. And it's the voters' job to tell me if, and also the electorate's job to tell me if that's what they actually want. If that's not what they want, that's not what we're going to do.
Okay. And so to be clear, you can't make those changes. That requires a legislation. Of course, the governor would have to sign off on it. He doesn't seem to be a strong proponent of that.
He's not.
I'd say he's a strong opponent of that, honestly.
Right.
Senator Jeremy England, as you know, did introduce legislation this past year that would have established early voting, not just absentee voting, which we allow today in Mississippi, but early voting. For no excuse, no reason whatsoever, and actually cast your ballot rather than just filling out a piece of paper that doesn't get counted until close of the polls on Election Day.
Right.
So, but I think what I'm hearing you say is you want to talk to the people and find out where they stand on that and get a sense of their position and then maybe advocate accordingly.
100%. What I have found, and the reason why I've also been confident in making this decision, is over the course of the last 10, 12 months. I've had an opportunity to meet Republicans all across Mississippi, particularly up in North Mississippi, and that's going to be a very strong point for this particular election. If we can pull it off in North Mississippi and also on the coast, I think we have a very good chance of winning the nomination. And people are enthusiastic about that opportunity. And when I talk with folks who are on, Republican executive committees and chairs across the state, they want to share their input. They want to be heard, and they want someone who's going to actually hear them. And I think that we're accomplishing that.
How do you see this particular office, Shuwaski, from a political party perspective? This has always been one of those offices I look at and say, well, is this a Republican versus Democrat situation here as an example?
Right. Well, I see it as one of which, the way we are right now, I think it could be a hyper-political office, to be quite honest with you. And that's because we want to be able to make sure that those people who are voting are actual American citizens and that those people who are voting are citizens of Mississippi through Real ID. That's something I'm going to be pushing. Now, I'm hoping that that's not going to be the case for Mississippi Democrats here to want people who are not citizens to be voting. I don't think that's ever been the case particularly, but I do think because of the political environment, that's important to note, and that could make it that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So are you sort of suggesting that maybe some Democrats in our state aren't as concerned about election integrity? I think there's a lot of Republicans that would say, yeah, they seem to want to...
Well, I think this. I think that any time that you can go against what are common sense measures as it relates to people just having a simple state-issued ID to be able to vote on election day.
So you totally support that, the voter ID laws
voter
in our
ID,
state? Strong
voter ID laws. Okay. And I support the president's executive order on Real ID and how they actually move forward and the requirements thereforth. That's the only way we can secure our elections. So I think that's important to do that.
Have you always, I'm just curious, have you always felt that way?
I've always felt that you need an ID to vote.
Okay.
Absolutely. There's
photo ID to vote.
Mississippi state issued photo ID to vote. Whether it's military ID, a state issued ID from an employer, student ID. Now, one thing that's interesting to me is, I talked with circuit clerks, just a few days ago, one particularly in Neshoba County, on their staff, and they said, well, you can also use your voter registration card, which is actually in the rules, you can. But I always wonder, how do you tie that with, ID?
I got to tell you, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
you can use your voter registration card.
You can use your voter registration card.
Which doesn't have a photo on it or a signature or anything.
Their answer to me was, because your name is already on the poll books for this particular precinct, so therefore no one is going to be able to vote twice. I said, well, what about the physical ID of a picture? They said, well, you can have it. Folks out there, look it up. Absolutely. You can use your voter registration card in Mississippi.
I mean, I guess what would happen if there's fraud committed is that somehow that card landed in the hands of a person that it is not attached to, and they went out and used it to vote, right? And then when the actual person shows up, they say, oh, you've already voted. Yeah. It's kind of what would happen.
But it does seem to me that, using a voter registration card would somehow come into conflict with the Real ID laws that are being put out right now as it relates to voting.
Well, maybe we should change the law to disallow the voter ID card as a form of identification to vote.
Before talking with legislators about that.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you this when we come back. I want you to think about it. But as a Democrat previously, just the notion that you actually support and favor voter ID laws, that's in direct conflict with the principles and the viewpoints of Democrats in this country. And I want you to talk about that on the other side. We got Shuwaski Young, who has just announced, folks, that he is a candidate for Mississippi Secretary of State in the 2027 election cycle. That's the next statewide election cycle in the great state of Mississippi. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
You're listening to
We interrupt this program.
Gerard Gibert.
Here we go.
This is huge. Huge news. Huge news. Huge.
You need to listen to this.
Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Oh, mama, I can hear you a-crying. You're so scared and all alone. Hangman is coming down from the gallows, and I don't have very long.
Got to keep that one active in there, Rhino. That's Dennis DeYoung and Styx. Renegade, we're talking to Shuwaski Young, who has just announced on our air that he is a candidate for Mississippi Secretary of State in 2027. So now you've actually been a delegate, right, from Mississippi to the DNC. Is that correct?
Not a delegate.
You weren't a delegate, but you've attended the national conference. Have you not?
No, not no. I
okay. I don't know where I got that impression from.
No, I was trained heavily at the DNC for many years.
Okay.
During those times.
I got you. So maybe that's what I'm thinking about. But this whole idea of voting, which is relevant because you're running for Secretary of State, and that's a major part of the responsibilities of that office, is that the Democrats don't even hide it. They don't favor voting ID. In fact, they want to make it almost easy to cheat, it feels like.
Well, it's part of the strategy, and that connects to immigration laws as well, too. And what we're seeing now, so we can get as many people on the rolls. Because, the more people you get in here, that equals representation in Congress. People know that, right? But no, having voter ID laws in place was something I've always believed in. Even before being a Republican and also during the time as a Democrat. So some, of course, didn't like that, but it's common sense to me, because working at the Secretary of State's office, one as an intern, and then working in the elections division itself, right?
Yeah.
Knowing firsthand what the rules were and why they were there in place to, protect the sanctity of our actual elections, ensure that our elections are actually secure, making sure that people who are voting are who they say they are, and voting in the places where they actually should. It's common sense for voter ID. I think it's important. I don't know why Democrats feel that it's a form of victimhood when you're trying to ask people to show their ID or making excuses for older people or whatever the case may be. But it's common sense for me. I think it's common sense for Mississippi.
Okay, so you're effectively announcing the launch of your campaign today.
Yeah.
We got 2.5 years till the election. Are you putting together a campaign apparatus? Some people around you, consultants and so forth?
Absolutely. Right now we're interviewing folks, and I'm interviewing folks, and I'll start making some decisions on that. We'll raise a little bit of money so we can be able to pay them properly. As we actually go out. There'll be a major launch over in Philadelphia, Mississippi, that will be a brick and mortar actual launch, right?
Okay.
So I've already spoken with folks within the county. They're excited about doing that. I'll invite some folks to come up and speak with me to help push that conservative message and help get that message out. I feel like we're going to run a very hyper local campaign to start. We want to be able to make sure that we secure Neshoba County, Rankin County, Scott County, and move forward in Winston County and also Leake County as well. As we move forward throughout the state, I'll be working, of course, up in North Mississippi, getting some help up there, and also down on the coast as well, too.
Okay. Now, you've managed to conceal this announcement, best I can tell. I haven't run into anybody that's talked about this.
Nobody, for so long, folks were saying, "Oh, I was probably going to run and probably run in a congressional race, probably over in District 2." Because I have been talking about how poor of a leader I believe Benny Thompson has been, and I think that people know that. And I think that that's important, especially when we see what crime has been over in the Delta and what's happening over there. But no, I always knew that, I was going to run statewide again. I was waiting on God to, lead me in the right direction and say when that time would actually be.
Okay. All right. So you plan to start traveling the state, I assume, as a result, right?
Absolutely. Well, I've already been in some meetings already with folks, up in the Tupelo area and things of that nature, and I'll continue to do that. They are inviting me with some more meetings that are coming up. I'll be doing some in-persons down on the coast as well too, with some folks who've been in the party quite some time that want to give you an opportunity to meet a lot of other people, and we'll continue to do that. And we'll build the apparatus out from there.
So if folks would like to contribute to your campaign, how can they do that today?
Well, we have a WinRed account. I'm going to put it right up under the SuperTalk message, and I'll also be putting it out on Facebook under my personal Facebook page at Shuwaski Young.
Okay.
Yeah, we're keeping it hyper simple and hyper local with this. Our email, of course, is info@youngformississippi.com.
Okay.
And we have a P.O. box that's in Philadelphia. We'll put all that out online, and people able to send us money. We really appreciate your help.
So what's your schedule look like from here on out? in the next few weeks here?
Well, I'm looking forward to the fair. That's for sure. So I know a lot of folks are coming to the fair. You'll be playing. I know you just told me. So definitely come see the house play.
The house band.
Absolutely. But over the course of the next coming weeks, I'll continue to meet with Republicans throughout the state. The main thing is securing the Republican nomination. If I'm so fortunate to and humbled and privileged to get the support of our Republican Party statewide for the Republican nomination, I think we know what's going to happen in the fall.
What would be your message in distinguishing yourself, Shuwaski, from other candidates in the primary, potential prospective Republican candidates in the primary?
Yeah. Well, one thing I know that distinguishes me is, I have the experience. Number one, I started out working in the Secretary of State's office. I know government. I've worked at the highest echelons of the federal government as well. I know how to build relationships with our legislators because that's something that is a main skill of mine, which is partnership, alliance, and things of that nature, how to build us together around one particular issue that's going to move us forward as a particular state. Okay. I also believe what separates me is the fact that, like many other people, I love Mississippi, but I'm committed to this particular office and committed to running, not only just because God told me to do it, and I feel that that's the case, but because it's always been a campaign that's going to be about purpose. And that purpose is making sure that we can move forward our state and change our national narrative outside of Mississippi. Not that we want other people from other states moving into Mississippi, but there are a lot of things that people get confused about Mississippi. Lord knows there's a lot of things people got confused about the Republican Party. I'm glad that I'm home now because I'm in a place that I can actually represent the values that I actually believe in, that are Mississippi values of faith and family and prosperity and hard work. And I think that that's something that will separate me as a candidate, to be able to carry that message into the black community, to get more black conservatives in our party.
Well, it brings up the next question. It doesn't seem like that your values and your policy positions have ever been aligned with the Democrat Party. Did you just feel kind of compelled to join the Democrat Party because of your race?
Like many African Americans and blacks in this country, of course I did. Right? When I left Mississippi and joined my first opportunity, that was with President Obama's campaign in 2012. Right? And that was an opportunity that I got both in Alabama and also in Las Vegas, and then I got on his presidential inaugural committee, and then later, of course, served in his administration at Homeland Security. And I think that all my friends at that particular time were aligned with Democratic politics, opportunities in business, opportunities for personal growth for that. But Mississippi was always home to me. Mississippi was those values are always there. And so what I think is different now is, I woke up and had the courage to say what I really felt and believed. And knowing that I've lost a lot of friends, especially a lot of black friends, I've lost a lot of people in politics that I've earned, I thought, the respect and trust over the course of the last 12 years. But it all came down to the fact that, hey, you're a Republican now, so we don't like you anymore. And I think that shows the fact of how some people can be and how when they choose not to have the courage to be themselves,
Do you feel like that having been part of the Democrat Party in your past, I mean, this, you're unique, you're an anomaly. There's not many people that switch parties one way or another, and we certainly see a lot more Democrats moving to the Republican Party than vice versa. Do you think that will enable you to perhaps build some bridges and maybe achieve some consensus?
Absolutely, I do, because I know there are a lot of other people out there who are Democrats who don't have the environment to be able to step out there like that. For example, I was talking with a Republican leader in North Mississippi just a few days ago, and he told me, he said, Shuwaski, what do you think about how your experience has been since you joined the Republican Party? I really want you to be honest with me about that. I know you came and talked to us. Look, we believed every word you said. That's why we want to have you back up here when we have other candidates back up who have already been up there. And I told him that, I felt like I was at home, finally, that I can actually be around people who think like I do. My fiance is very conservative as well. Of course, she's a prosecutor and works in law enforcement. Yeah. But also he talked about, in our county, we had all of our all of our county supervisors switch political parties a few years ago. And I asked them the same question. And that's the same exact thing they told me. They thought they're at home now, and they wish they had done it a heck of a lot sooner.
I mean, so do you feel like maybe a little pressure's off of you because you have one set of beliefs, but you're part of a party that doesn't align with those? In the past, when you were a Democrat?
Of course there were. Of course there was. I couldn't say what I really felt about, and I just thank God that I'm a better and stronger man today, and I learned a lot from it. I couldn't say what I really felt about, pro-life, for example, right? I couldn't say what I really felt about as it relates to full Second Amendment rights and things of that nature. I couldn't say what I really felt and really thought about how we should move best in tax policy to help the middle class, help poor folks, and that really goes back to personal responsibility, not just government programs.
Okay.
So yeah, it's evolved well over the course of many years, but over the course of the last 18 to 20 months, I've had an opportunity to really say what I really believe and join a party that I think accepts that and has treated me well since then.
Well, best of luck to you in your
so
campaign for Mississippi Secretary of State 2027. Folks, Shuwaski Young, he just announced right here on Middays that he is officially a candidate for Secretary of State in 2027 in Mississippi. Appreciate you coming on and making that announcement, Shuwaski.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much, everybody here at SuperTalk, for letting me say it here. Thank you all so very much.
Yep. Folks, we're stepping aside for a break. Coming right back. We got half an hour of Middays remaining.
From the Seabrook. Gerard Gibert. Going beyond the headlines, breaking down the stories that matter to Mississippi. Middays with Gerard on SuperTalk Mississippi.
It's 9 o'clock on a Saturday. A regular crowd shuffles in. There's an old man sitting next to me, making love to his tonic. And
yeah, that's the one that got it started for the great Billy Joel right there. Piano Man. So the news is now seems to be totally focused on the final push for the one big beautiful bill. And Miss McDonough Elizabeth, by the way, her name, first name, I couldn't recall her first name. She's the one that said, not so fast there, Republican Senate. All this stuff you've included in this bill does not pass muster with respect to the reconciliation rules, the so-called bird rules, the bird bath. And specifically, Rhino, what she said is these provisions that would cap provider taxes, and those are just taxes paid by medical providers to the states to help offset the state portion of costs of Medicaid, but it allows the states, as a result, because they're getting more money from outside of taxpayer revenue, to tap more federal money. And that blows up the cost of Medicaid at the federal level, since the government picks up at a minimum 50%. By law. And in the state of Mississippi gets the highest federal match because we are the poorest state in the country, and the federal match is based on per capita income. We get 78 cents of virtually every dollar that goes to Medicaid comes from the federal government. So that's one of the things. And then this other provision that would penalize, essentially, is what it really does. It doesn't end. That's kind of misrepresented benefits for illegals. It penalizes states that continue to pay for illegals to be on their Medicaid, in their Medicaid program, even out of their pocket. And then there are regulations on gun silencers, by the way. You've seen that. That didn't make the cut either.
That or the short barrel firearms changes.
Right. And then federal subsidies for some religious schools. That didn't make the cut.
But somehow made it through the House parliamentarian.
Yeah, I don't get that. Now, the House
parliamentarian was appointed in 2020.
Yeah.
Not by Harry Reid.
But remember, however, that would only apply once it came back from the Senate because it's still a majority. You don't have a supermajority requirement that you do. This is why the parliamentary is so important. Now, they could certainly say, guys, you can't put this in the bill. But because it's just a bill that you expect to pass in the Senate, because when it leaves the House, you can't assume, that can't get a filibuster-proof majority vote. The House parliamentarian cannot act with that assumption. But if it comes back and the Senate parliamentarian said, I said this was okay to pass with a simple majority, in fact, the House parliamentarian could say, not so fast, Senate parliamentarian. So this is all how the sausage is made. And I guess you could say, at the end of the day, this is a function of, and I guess an evidence of just how polarized we are in this country. Equally is really the important aspect of that is that we're so evenly divided that we can't get 60 votes in the Senate. That the most you could hope for would be the 53 Republicans, assuming they all support this, but several of them have pushed back and said they can't support it, talking about Republicans. So that's what's going on here is we really just don't have consensus in the country more than anything. So the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, we had an analyst from that organization on Monday. They've actually increased their estimate of how much the Senate bill would add to the debt. $3.5 to $4.2 trillion through fiscal year 2034. Again, remember, it's 10-year estimates. Now, keep in mind, that doesn't mean how much total additional debt would be added if the bill passes. That figure represents how much would be added if the bill didn't pass. Additionally, not the total amount of debt that's going to be added, additional debt because of the bill. What it looks like right now, based on our current deficit of $2.3 trillion, is that most economists say, we're looking at adding another $25 trillion of debt in the next 10 years, putting us north of $50 trillion of debt by 2034. Let's see here on the ceasefire text line. They would have cried even if he let them bomb Israel. Talking about Democrats, Rhino shaking his head. That's correct. The company pays the tariffs when they import, correct? Says Walter. That is correct, Walter. It's assessed and levied at the point of import. They remit that to the Treasury. The American companies that import, correct. I'm going to go out on a limb and say she read the Democrat Cliff Notes version of the Big Beautiful Bill. That in reference to the individual I caught on my reels on social media that was decrying the legislation, but virtually everything she said was wrong. In fact, you know what else she said that really got my attention? She said, they're exempting and ending estate taxes. No, it doesn't end estate taxes. It does increase the exemption to align more with inflation to $15 million tax-free that you could bequeath, leave behind. But it doesn't exempt all estates. That's the impression she gave. And then the other thing when I'm watching this is thinking, why are these people so obsessed with getting more tax revenue? It ain't like that matters to how much they spend. If it did, we wouldn't have $2.3 trillion deficits. It's not like
because they're not looking at taxes like funding for the government. They're looking at taxes as punishment for the rich.
100%, 1,000%. And all the policies are made based on who can afford it. Not, how much taxes should we reasonably collect to fund the constitutionally appropriate functions of government? It's a punishment vehicle. You made too much money. We got to take some. It's just amazing how they just go, and it's this either-or stuff. We can't have Medicaid because we've got to give tax breaks to the rich. That's horse hockey. That's completely false. And unfortunately, with these reconciliation rules, that does figure into the equation. How much is going in? How much is going out? How much is coming in? And they add all that up, measure it all up, and say, oh, yeah, that doesn't meet the reconciliation rules. That's too much going in or coming in, too much going out, or not enough coming in, really. It'd never be too much in their view. But nonetheless, they make it sound like it's an either-or scenario, and it's not. It's absolutely not. If it were, we'd have a balanced budget. Have they ever thought about that? Like, since when is it? But you're so right. That doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. What matters is we got to punish that group of people. And you're going to vote for me because I support punishing that group of people. That's the message. You don't have as much as them. I'm going to handle that for you. I'm going to punish them. Because if they just wanted to give you more money, they just do that anyhow. What the hell did Joe Biden do when he passed the ARPA? $1.9 trillion, which is really what stimulated inflation. March of the year he took office, 3 months into it. Here's this bill. The American Rescue Plan. Rescue from what? It was doing fine. The economy was recovering nicely from the COVID crap. But he had to pour fuel on the fire there, and that ignited inflation way more than well, I shouldn't say than they expected. They don't even understand enough about it to have a reasonable expectation. But this notion of just crying over taxes, I just look at that like, why are you crying because you can't get more of that group of people's money? You're obsessed with other people's money. You're consumed with it. And I can tell you this, no person that's ever achieved wealth obsesses with other people's money. They concern themselves. They don't count other people's money. Let's put it that way. They only worry about them damn selves. That's how you get rich in this country. Coming right back with the final segment.
Point 3.
Gibert. He keeps his classified documents right where they belong. Inside a Journey record jacket from the 1980s. Gerard Gibert, SuperTalk, Mississippi.
I fall off my chair, and I'm wondering how I'll get down the stairs. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. Yes,
welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Well studio. Mike from Columbus says, here's a good idea. Rename the big, beautiful bill to Democrats Save America bill, then they'll vote for it. Gary from Tishomingo says that...
Sad thing is, you might actually be able to peel off a vote or two.
That's probably true. It's kind of aligns with the identity politics they lean into. That Another Pleasant Valley Sunday says was written by Carole King. I didn't know that. Is that right? Because he says, I'd mentioned, I remember when we played it was my favorite Monkees tune. I think that's what he's talking about. Says my favorite also. Let's see here. Last year, a month's supply of Wegovy cost $30. This year, it's $400 with no explanation.
Yeah, that's an example of it's on the manufacturer pretty much entirely, because the manufacturer of the weight loss drugs like Wegovy saw that they were gaining in popularity with celebrities and influencers and saw an opportunity to make some profit.
It's incredible how that whole new class of drugs, right, is taking hold and how popular they are. And
how little is discussed the side effects that can come with extended use of those products.
Don't hear much about that. But
Nope.
I've heard people, my wife's actually talked about that. I think she's aware of some situations.
And it's a pretty wide variety of detrimental side effects like liver damage or blindness.
Seems like the liver is always what's subject to damage, right, from drugs. I'm not sure I understand the physiology there. But
in simplest terms, it's your body's filter.
Yeah. And so all that stuff
it's
flows
like the air
through
filter
it.
on your car.
And it says, hey, what's this stuff, right? I mean, in general, it's not made around that. Good afternoon, Mr. Young. I was hoping, this is Gloria from Clinton, you were going to run for Congressional District 2. In that position, you can certainly do a lot for people in the Delta and West counties of the state. I believe your chances would be great. Please reconsider your decision. I did pass that on to him, Gloria. You know, and he just kind of smiled, didn't say much. I've said something to him about that before. I think he's just handicapping that and saying, and I'm not trying to speak on his behalf, it's just my opinion, that his chances of winning still would be very difficult. Uphill battle in that district with Benny Thompson, simply because he'd be a Republican. And they've just been, just like he said, I've been conditioned as a black person to just vote Democrat. The Republicans hate black people, and they've done an effective job. I won't say a good job, but they've been effective at the Democrats of promoting that message that Republicans don't care about you and they're going to hurt you. And the reality is the Democrats that are really their enemy. It's their policies that have done more harm. I hope they wake up and realize that, see things our way from a conservative perspective, and I think you'll find that those policies would improve the quality, certainly, of opportunity and of your life. Thomas from Greenwood, not happy about the one big beautiful bill. He said defeating it is the last gasp for conservatism. If this passes, there's no longer any semblance of fiscal responsibility in the Republican Party. So, Thomas, you want taxes to go up? Because if this bill doesn't pass, taxes are going up. I thought conservatives supported lower taxes and less taxation, less government. So I'm a little confused on that. They'll sue Wegovy and get a lot of money, just like Fen-Phen. Yeah, talking about side effects. Could be. Many of those cases, as you know, occurred right here in Mississippi, not far from our position in the southeastern part of the state, western part of the state, I believe, that
I think the only difference there would
awards.
be Fen-Phen was over the counter and this is prescription medication. And usually with prescription medication, it comes with disclaimers, and in the packaging you have the side effects listed. So you have been warned. It's just the influencers and the celebrities that are using it to lose all that weight aren't going to tell you about the negative side effects because that would blemish their perfect look.
Tim and McGee wants to know, why don't they just remove the Senate parliamentarian? And you pointed out the vice president could do that, and you looked it up last time that happened.
Yeah, the last time that happened was over a fight over the filibuster rules in '75, and Vice President Nelson Rockefeller overruled the Senate parliamentarian. I believe it was a week or two later that both the House and the Senate came together to ultimately change the rules without having to involve the parliamentarian.
Tim, I'd also say that all of this is for fear that if and when the day comes that Democrats are back in control, they start doing stuff like this. And the same thing would be with respect to ending the filibuster. They probably, Republicans in the Senate, could end it today and take all this off the table, but they won't because of fear that the Democrats would do it when they get in control. So it's a political calculus. Folks, have a great weekend. Back with you again Monday. Until then, stay safe and God bless.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.